Really?
Did you get the cutscenes now? That I
Really?
pointed out?
Yeah. But really? That's where you end it?
Yeah. Oh my lordy. Whew.
I got nothing. I got nothing. That was... Yeah, wow. Ended on that note, why don't you? Just tease for System Shock 3 that never happened!
Indeed. Oh god.
Wow. Okay.
Ah, Shodan never dies.
Shodan. So, I guess we can have kind of the final wrap-up, conclusion, thoughts, and everything.
I suppose so.
So, fuck that boss battle.
Yeah, really fuck that boss battle.
Yeah.
Let me know if the music is too loud, by the way, guys.
So,
yeah,
I didn't see what the boss battle was between you and Shodan, but I'm guessing it was just hack a few terminals, shoot her in the face.
No, basically, she was in the middle, in a shielded chamber. She had different colored shields around her that kept rotating around. You could damage the shields one by shooting them. Probably my EM damage did more damage. I ran around on a platform on the outside, and she occasionally spawned in physical form, like, you know, a person, and ran around and shot, you know, photon blasts at me. She died in one shot, so those physical manifestations could be thrown out easily. There was 2 or 3 terminals on the outside with a virtual floor under them, and one of the floors were lava, or they were red and glowing. You couldn't stand on them because you took damage. The other 2 you could stand at. So basically, I think if you had hacking skill, you'd be able to hack away the shields she had and then shoot her. But I mean, I just shot right through the shields because I am, and then finally killed her, and then the cutscene played. So it wasn't too bad for a boss fight, actually. Far better than the brain.
That brain has a lot of problems. I mean, the respawning enemies, the really tight corridors that don't really give you much room to move around, and then the lack of any sort of healing, and then the running back. God. Way too much of that reminds me of Half-Life 1. I don't blame Disone for thinking, yeah, that looks an awful lot like Half-Life 1's boss, because can't help but think that maybe it was inspired by it.
Yeah,
and
I don't
unfortunately,
remember when one of them came first, actually. I think it was Half-Life 1.
Yeah, because this was made in 1999, I'm pretty sure Half-Life came before that.
Probably did.
So, as far as the game as a whole, I mean, the shooting's kind of a mess. It feels inaccurate and just kind of goes wherever you want it to go, but shouldn't go. But, you know...
Yeah, Half-Life was a year before. You're right.
I mean, overall, it certainly held up a lot better than Half-Life 1. Eek. I mean, that game's kind of a mess.
Yeah, especially towards the latter half.
Yeah. But
I mean, overall, I would say System Shock 1 is the better game. I mean, it has awkward controls because it's really, really old. But as far as actual gameplay and horror goes, I think System Shock 1 is actually far superior to the second one. The second one is a bit modern and has, you know, an interesting interface, I suppose. And it has a very coherent story. I did like the story of System Shock 2. That's probably my best story ever. I mean, as far as it's told, I mean, not like, oh, this is the most amazing thing I've never heard before, because the story itself is kind of, you know, generic. Super AI creates aliens and whatever. But the way it was told with all the logs and you followed people throughout the game, that was really impressive, actually. I like that a lot. So it succeeded very well in creating atmosphere and telling a story. So I can see how it was kind of a forerunner in that way. As far as gameplay itself goes, well, there are obviously better games. The shooting is awkward, the balance is way off. I mean, there's way too many weapons that are just pointless in that game. Like the stasis launcher, the EMP rifle, all of the exotic weapons are essentially trash.
Especially...
Except for the crystal shard. The crystal shard is broken as fuck.
Especially when you consider how many resources it requires to get those exotic weapons. It's like, so this is what we get, a weapon that is slightly more powerful, burns out faster, and that's it. I mean, the stasis launcher feels like that was designed for multiplayer. You could have someone stasis the monster and the other guy shoot it up.
Yeah, like a support weapon or something, because I can't see any situation in the actual game, if we were playing solo, where you would use the stasis launcher. It would just be much more efficient to just, kill them. So yeah.
And yeah, as Sony points out, there's a lot of platforming, especially towards the end, which again, it was a symptom of the time. I mean,
It was.
Half-Life wasn't the only one. Half-Life, System Shock, they all these FPSs that came out at the time were just, we need something else to do besides shooting, let's do first-person platforming.
Because that's a brilliant idea.
I am so glad that died after the 90s, because I don't think I would have enjoyed FPSs afterwards.
No.
And
I mean, the only modern FPS I remember having excessive amounts of first-person platforming is the Rise of the Triad remake. And that game tries to closely mimic the old game, so I understand it's there, but it's just as frustrating as it was back in the day.
There was a first-person puzzle game that kind of had shooting here recently. It's probably actually been like 4 years ago. One of the main voice leads was John Q. Delancey.
Okay.
And he was... it was interesting, but I never played it because I noticed there is a crap ton of platforming in that game. No. Actually, Portal 2 is kind of inspired some of that to come back in puzzle games, but they tend to focus more on puzzling than actually platforming, thank goodness.
Yeah, because first-person platforming is... it's awkward. I mean, Mirror's Edge does it pretty decently, because it has a really good platforming system. System Shock 2 is way off. The controls are so floaty. It's so
That's
hard.
what kills me about System Shock 2, is that they had floaty controls, but they're like, oh, they'll be fine, we can platform as well. Did you guys not even play that, or I don't know. And we did have to mod it a lot, but even unmodded, the game doesn't look too bad.
No, it doesn't actually.
But the mods definitely help keep it, or bring it up to more modern looks. It does.
Especially the character models, because they look like ass.
Oh yeah, that cutscene really just kind of shows the big difference between the two.
Yeah, especially when you zoom in on his face. You just go like, what the hell is that thing even?
I do like the various branches you could take and kind of the different researches you could do. I think that was, for the most part, well thought out. I mean, obviously there were some major problems with like research and what was the other one?
Well, my biggest problem with the skills are basically that repair and maintenance should have been one skill.
Yeah, I don't get why that's two different things. It's like repair. Isn't that basically the same thing that you're doing? Yeah, that was utterly confusing, and that should have been one skill.
Yeah, and don't get me started on the weapon balance.
Yeah,
because,
well,
I mean, if you actually play the game in single player, there is no point in taking any other weapon skill than standard weapons. Because the assault rifle does the most damage of any weapon in the entire game, over time, I mean, DPS. And you can basically use the standard ammo with it throughout the entire game. If you need something bigger, you pick up Heavy 2 for the grenade launcher, and that's it. You don't need anything else.
Yeah, although my weapon, the plasma launcher...
Yeah, the plasma cannon.
Yeah, the plasma cannon, that did quite a bit of damage. So, it's
But I
almost
can't see
worth
it really
picking it
being
up.
useful in single player though.
And single player, maybe not. I mean, you do have to get the. I mean, I guess it depends on how much grenade and the other type of ammo you're picking up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find a good mix of both, then yeah, probably getting up to that weapon skill is worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, besides some of the bugginess which we had with the multiplayer mod, which, well, it's rated experimental, so not really surprising. I'm just glad there weren't more cutscenes in this game. Besides the one that we found in the middle there, this game would have been a far bigger nightmare, I think.
Yeah.
But, you know, as an experience, as a total experience, yeah, I would agree that System Shock 1 has the better atmosphere and kind of overall gameplay, I guess, but System Shock 2 feels a lot more refined, a lot more, and it has a way better story, for that matter.
Yeah.
Whereas Sys 1 kind of feels like it comes in and then leaves and then comes back in again. This one has an overarching plot to it.
Yeah, it does. System Shock 1 is more mission-based, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you do one mission, you get some story exposition, and then you do another mission, and you get some story exposition, and it keeps going like that. System Shock 2 had way more logs and whatnot that keeps the story going all the time, and you kind of get indications on the way what is going to happen, and you also get to follow all these people. I mean, you kind of did that in System Shock 1 too, but you never really felt like you were working together with someone. It was more like you were trying to get to someone, and then you got there and they were dead. In System Shock 2, there's kind of like you can see these indications of what other people are doing, and you're interacting with Polito. Okay, sure, she's Shodan, but still, it's kind of like it feels like you're working with someone. The first game is more like you wake up and everything's gone to hell.
Yeah, it did feel like there's more people on this ship, which they also tried to do that by, you know, we would see them occasionally. We never interacted with them, which I'm guessing was a limitation of the engine, but or
Probably,
just what they wanted to do.
Yeah,
I mean, we still never directly had people following us or whatever, which I can understand why they wouldn't do like any escort missions, because I can only imagine how nightmarish that would have gone.
Yeah.
But you know, we saw those two characters throughout the entire story, pretty much. The couple whose name I'm forgetting, which I thought was
Suarez and Rebecca.
Which I thought was pretty neat. That we just followed them throughout the entire game. We never really saved them, but you know, we never really harmed them either.
Indeed, we did see them at some point though. We did see their escape pod leave, and we saw them near the bridge and all that. And we also had, you know, Delacroix. She was with us all the way to the end, even though we only heard her in logs. But she was like always just this one step ahead of us. It felt like we were going to catch up to her eventually. And I mean, in that way, I think it's really well good. And then she dies, of course, because everyone dies.
Everyone dies in System Shock.
Yeah.
But
now,
yeah,
that is a little bit more traumatizing in the first game, because you do, when you get to, I think it's deck 6 in the first game, you get to hear from those survivors. But I mean, in the first game, you didn't even know there were survivors. You just thought you were alone on this station. Everyone was dead or mutated. But then you get to deck 6, and you actually learn that there's actually people alive here. And you fight through this entire deck just to get through them. And when you get there, there's this giant Cortex Reaver ripping them apart, and you're like, ah, crap, I'm too late.
yeah.
That's like, oh, fuck. But yeah, I mean, my problem with System Shock 2 definitely lies in the gameplay itself.
Yeah.
Story and presentation is much better than System Shock 1, but balance and gameplay is way worse, because it's just so off. And everything moves awkwardly, so it's hard to aim, and it just never feels fluid. The first game, while it has awkward controls, they're at least very accurate. So it feels much more responsive, and you basically use any weapon in the game, except for possibly the stun darts, because those are just bad. But you can basically make it through the first game with any weapon.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really miss in the second game, that like you're locked off from different, like you can't have exotics and NGD, and it's kind of hard to branch into multiple weapons, and when you branch into multiple weapons, you realize that, holy crap, these are bad.
Yeah. It feels like the gameplay problem was just not enough polish, not enough time to really work on it and to make it better. It's... Yeah, that's... And as I seem to recall, there were development problems with this game due to EA being... Well,
Yeah, they rushed it out.
EA.
They rushed it out. I mean, the multiplayer netcode is there. That's not a mod or anything that anyone has added afterwards. It's simply a configuration file that you edit to enable the multiplayer menu, so you can actually access the multiplayer. But the multiplayer itself was obviously never really finished because we had a lot of syncing problems, and as you can see, animations just freak out. The netcode isn't really good, and also the fact that I completely lost that. Whatever.
You can't see cutscenes. I fell into a dark, deep hole. You know,
Yeah,
there's...
spawning issues, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, the game is not balanced for multiplayer.
No, I would definitely guess that it's not. Though it makes me wonder how one gets through it single player. So.
Well, to be granted, if you play in multiplayer, you automatically play on the hardest difficulty, which is impossible. And there's no way around that. If you play multiplayer, it goes to top difficulty instantly.
Okay,
So basically, we had the lowest health, we had the lowest amount of cyber modules you ever can get, and the enemies have a lot of health, and there's a lot of enemies. I mean, in that way, it's balanced, but you can play Impossible and beat it in single player. So, there's no additional difficulty or any other changes for multiplayer in System Shock 2, and that I definitely think is a timing thing. They just rushed it out, and they just let's just hide the multiplayer. It's not done.
Well, I mean, when you rushed it out, you know, and I don't blame them for having that issue. I mean, we still have that issue today, and it's a pity that it ends here because I really would have loved to see this series go another step, or even come back in a more modern take on it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that became BioShock and the entire BioShock series.
Yeah, and while the first BioShock was kind of System Shocky, it didn't at all catch the atmosphere in the same way. I think that was more of a setting thing. But
well, I mean,
can see what they were going with.
Yeah, they clearly wanted to do something different. I mean, that no doubt had something to do with it. And I don't know if all the developers that worked on the System Shock series moved to the BioShock series. It is very likely that a good chunk of those who preferred the more System Shock setting didn't transition over, or they were tired of it, so they moved to BioShock to take a more sci-fi under the sea sort of setting without an overlord AI to it. And, you know, that happens. It's just a pity that the BioShock just... It's different. That's really what I can say about it. And it's just not as appealing as this series is.
No.
Which is just too bad. It's really too bad that the combat's just even worse. You would think, given more resources, the combat would have gotten better. I think System Shock 2... The System Shock 2 expansion made by a completely different development company had the better... Or wait, no, it wasn't the expansion. It was just System Shock 2 was developed by a different company, and it actually had a better combat system.
Yeah.
So, it's also pretty clear that the developers of these series don't really have combat as in the forefront of their mind.
No, and I mean, when I first read about System Shock 2, it sounded like this fantastic... it was intended to have so much in it. I mean, you would have a living AI that would actually, you know, try to find you and counterplay you if you hacked things, or if you were detected by cameras. It wouldn't just spawn a bunch of enemies and come after you. It would actually change things on the decks, and the upgrade system were supposed to be much more, you know, diverse and more balanced. So I know there were really big plans for System Shock 2 that apparently never came to fruition because rushed.
Well, you can see some of the building blocks in there.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, it was... it was pretty obvious that they were setting up for that, but then, you know, it got rushed, so they had to cut a lot of corners on it. And, you know, what we still get isn't bad, but it's kind of... Yeah, it's unfinished, and it's hard to recommend solely on the gameplay. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it at all, because the combat is just... It's passable. It's awkward, passable. It's much like other series that are about this old. It's enough to get by to keep things interesting, but you don't play for it.
No, you basically play it for the story in that case, for the experience and, you know, the atmosphere. That's why you would play this game, because it's very noticeable that what they did focus on, what they kind of finished first, was the story, because it's very well made.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of a risky thing, because they don't make games like this anymore, where you basically can miss almost the entire story. I mean, you can go through the game without picking up a log at all, pretty much, almost. And you'll miss a lot of the story that way. So, that way I like it, because it rewards exploration and stuff. And yeah, Sam, I agree, this music is awesome.
It also gives player choice. You know, if they don't want to experience the story, then they can skip it right on by. And, you know, it's very apparent that they have this sort of player choice when it comes to storytelling, because the latest game that can be attributed to these developers is Gone Home, and it is very similar to System Shock's Origins. I mean, obviously a lot of the mechanics were stripped out when they did Gone Home, but the storytelling and how it is told and how they show but don't tell is very apparent in Gone Home, and you can see the similarities back to System Shock too. Not saying that they're the same game, but you can definitely tell this is what their ideal storytelling is. And in a lot of ways you can appreciate it, because, you know, you look around in System Shock 1 and System Shock 2, it's like, well, you can definitely tell that shit has hit the fan, that you're on a space station or spaceship, as whatever game it might be, and they leave clues and hints as to what's been going on, you know, and dead bodies surrounded by droids. It's like, well, shit happened here.
Yeah, and I also liked how they tied in with the first game, like how they explained how everything happened, and how they don't just spoil it straight up. Because, I mean, if you make a sequel like this, it would be very easy to start with a cutscene and just say that, oh, 45 years ago, a pod was launched from this and this station by the hacker, and a sub-process of Shodan was on it, and her biological experiment, blah, blah, blah. 40 years later, they have evolved on Tau Ceti, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it would be so easy to just launch that upon the player at the beginning to set the stage for the game. But they didn't. Instead, they just, yeah, here's this ship that travels faster than light. It goes away into space, and you're on it because you're an awesome marine and all that. And then you just wake up and have your memory wiped.
I wonder...
You just go, what happened? I mean, there's basically no setting whatsoever. You just wake up, your mind is wiped, someone tells you to get the fuck out or you'll die. It's like, who am I? What am I doing? That's kind of the opening there.
I wonder if the training part was kind of also rushed too, because I feel like, and just the indication that there's a room beyond where you, because when you go through the last door, it kind of looks like there's a room beyond, and maybe that's just what they intended, but it honestly feels like that they were planning on doing something more with the whole intro part, into introducing your character a little bit more, instead of just going through 3 hallways that decide your stats. I am curious what that would have been.
Yeah, because if they really wanted to do that, you know, setting it up and everything, they could have just made a menu where you click.
Well, and that's what most...
pick your choices, instead of just running through 3 corridors.
Yeah, it would have been more traditional RPG, which this game kind of has in it. And they could have done all of those cutscenes as kind of one big cutscene, instead of this kind of fragmented cutscenes of you flying off in a shuttle, is what it essentially results in. And it's actually kind of confusing in that regard, because, like, what the hell am I even doing?
Indeed.
And you kind of figure it out, but it definitely feels like the intro is designed afterwards when they're like, we have to do something, let's just rush this. And I would have been curious to see what they were planning. Instead, well, you're kind of confusingly woken up and about to die.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which,
So,
as you said, is a great way to introduce it, because it does work for both new players and experienced players. New players won't know what the hell is going on. Well, you're not supposed to know what the hell is going on. Just listen to orders. And the other players will not really know what's going on. They can kind of get indications, especially when you start hearing Shodan chipping through. But other than that,
the whole talk about the AI and all that. I mean, the first time I played this game, it was a couple of years ago now, but the first time I played System Shock 2, I really had this wondrous sensation of, you know, what do you call it? Not exploration, but, you know, noticing things and starting to reliving things from System Shock 1, especially when you hear the Shodan talks and all that, and you hear them talking about an AI, and you kind of go, that has to be Shodan because she's supposed to be in this game, etc., etc. But then you start thinking, where the hell did these hybrids come from? It's like, you have no clue. How did they show up? I mean, why are there even mutants in this place and all that? And it just all falls together so well as the game goes on, and that's something I liked.
yeah, they have a really clever storytelling, and it's the same thing with like Gone Home. You basically get an intro sequence of just audio. You're hearing a phone play back a message on a voicemail saying, "Hi mom, I'm going to be home, blah 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 blah." And then it just drops you right in front of the house, right at the door, and you're like, well, now what? And you just kind of go throughout the entire house, piecing together, are they alive? Are they dead? I mean, this is kind of what I interpreted, is that maybe someone's not alive, you're like the ghost that's returned home or something like that. And kind of
a Sixth Sense thing.
Yeah, kind of. You don't see any other ghosts, though, so maybe that was my misinterpretation. But you also get to experience, you know, different parts of the family, what the family is about, and it all kind of comes together towards the end, and it's really satisfying when they do it that way. It doesn't feel patronizing, like you're some stupid moron that can't figure out what 2 + 2 is. Because that's where a lot of storytelling really loses me. It's like, we have to instruct you on every piece of this world. You can't figure it out because you're a moron, and I have to make sure my vision is intact. And
yeah, and it's accurately portrayed to you, so you experience exactly what I want you to experience.
And it's funny because I'd been listening to an audiobook for the past couple of weeks, and it has the same problem. It treats you like a moron while also trying to have a mystery in it, but not really. And then it also over-explains like 3 times in a row what this thing is for. It's like, okay, I am not a child. You cannot, or you do not have to explain what a phaser does. There isn't a phaser, but this is what it kind of came down to. It's like, I've seen Star Trek. I've seen other Star things. I know what this does. Yeah, so.
Alright, so enough with the rambling. I'm not going to ask you to put a score on this.
Because I'm not going to give you one.
Did you like it or not?
Yes. And, you know, I really like the storytelling. I really think they did a good job on the atmosphere. It's not as tight as the first one, but they do manage to keep you engaged the entire time. Gameplay obviously has its problems. I mean, floaty combat, floaty movement, things are a little bit confusing at times, and just some of the choices they made are just bizarre. Yeah. Especially the exotic weapon line is just entirely useless. There's no real reason to pick it up, and some of the other weapon lines kind of feel the same way too. But overall, as an experience, there's a reason why System Shock 2 is still well liked to this day.
Yeah, the story is definitely something else, and the experience. And I mean, it took us around 14 hours to get through the game, so it's actually a fairly long game too. I mean, most games today are like 4 or 5 hours, and that's it.
God, that's depressing.
Yeah. So.
But then again, RPGs have always been good at keeping you long too. So.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks guys for watching, and we'll see what we stream the next time.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea, but we'll see.
And no, it's not going to be Chrono Trigger. I don't think we could even do that. No, it's not going to be Witcher 3. No, it's not going... Well, it might be Dark Souls. Who knows? But...
No. You're going to play that on your own.
Yeah, right. But no, it's not going to be Metal Gear Solid 5. No. I've already declared I'm not touching that game. And The Witcher 3, well, we can't do a multiplayer. So the two of us won't be.
Pretty bad. But maybe something else. We'll see.
Alrighty.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.